Reading in a different language can be challenging, but it is also one of the fastest ways to improve your comprehension. I've been through that frustration myself. In middle school, I started learning English. At university, I minored in Japanese and studied abroad in Tokyo for a year. Now I'm in Canada learning French. Over time, I found some ways to not only make reading experience easier, but also more enjoyable. When I was learning Japanese, we were not allowed to speak English in class. We had to learn everything in Japanese. The biggest lesson I've learned is that it's important to learn a language in its native tone. Of course, this doesn't mean to avoid translations entirely. Sometimes I spend a lot of time reading intensively, translating, and trying to understand everything. Other times I read without translating and just go with the flow. But this only works for certain types of books. So I've come up with 5 ways to make reading easier. It's very important to pick the right books so you don't feel overwhelmed. I finished reading Le Petit Prince last month, but I wouldn't recommend it to beginners. It took me a very long time to get through. I found that picture books or children's books are the most helpful. Recently, I've been reading Le Petit Nicolas. It's much easier. If you're at an A2 level like me, this is a great place to start. As for Japanese, most of you probably have heard of the animator Hayao Miyazaki-san. By the way, Spirited Away is my favorite. When I first started reading Japanese, I picked up his picture books. Because there's so many of his movies out there, it's very helpful to watch his movie first and then read them in Japanese.
Toujours rien. Le Petit Prince dit en
When I was struggling to read Le Petit Prince, I found an audio version on YouTube that really helped me understand it better. If you're reading children's books in another language, it's likely there will be an audio version available online. It's a great way to practice both listening and reading at the same time. Whenever I felt overwhelmed by too much information, I'd switch things up by listening to the narration instead. To make things less stressful, it's better to start with just 1 or 2 pages at a time. Once your vocabulary grows, you can read more. As much as I love physical books because I enjoy the feel of the pages, I've found it more efficient to use an electronic copy so I can take notes directly on the text. If you have an iPad, it's super convenient to mark things up. When I was younger, I read Harry Potter to improve my English. Sometimes when we start reading in a foreign language, we might not enjoy the book because of the plot, or we feel anxious when we don't understand everything. Reading your favorite books in a different language is a great way to stay interested and make comprehension easier since you already know what's going to happen. Even if you're not a big reader, it will be less exhausting compared to reading a completely new book. I once tried reading a Japanese novel, but it really took away all the joy. Instead, I prefer manga, and I recently ordered some new ones. I used to love the anime One Punch Man, so I decided to read the manga version. I definitely feel more comfortable reading something I'm already familiar with. I love reading manga to improve my Japanese because reading is a hobby for me, and combining it with language learning keeps me entertained. Instead of looking up every word like I do when reading in French, I let myself enjoy the manga without constant interruptions. When I don't understand something, I try to figure it out by looking at the images or guessing from the surrounding sentences. I've realized this works best when you already know some Japanese, so encountering a few new words isn't a big problem. I can't apply this method to my French reading yet because my level isn't high enough and it's a complete disaster if I don't translate. I think having two different approaches, intense reading for learning and more relaxed reading for enjoyment, helps keep me motivated to practice regularly, depending on my energy and schedule. With these methods, I hope you start to enjoy reading a little bit more. I also love to hear your thoughts on this topic. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.